We are live now.
Yes.
So we are just going to start because we are already live. Hello and welcome to the Global Youth Mental Health Awareness Show. This is the show whereby we impact youths and everyone on matters concerning mental health. Today I'll be your moderator, Edith Wanyonyi, standing in for KATINDA. KATINDA has been doing a very great live show, and so it's such an honor and I'm so humbled to be moderating this show today. So, as I said, my name is Edith Wanyonyi. I am a counseling psychologist, community development practitioner, GYMHA's advocacy manager and ambassador. I'm also a humanitarian worker and an advocate of mental health. So today I'm so humbled and feel very great to be joined with two amazing panelists. And our first panelist is Esther Timothy. So I'm just going to introduce them. Her name is Esther Timothy. She's a psychologist and mental health advocate. She studied at the University of Uyo, where she earned a bachelor's degree in psychology and also earned certification in global mental health professional development from University of Washington. She has worked with USAID's in implementing partners as the mental health and social support focal person, and this has broadened her horizon on the concept of mental health and psychological intervention. So she also works as a focal person for harm reduction activities, a program organized for people who reject drugs. She's also an educator at St. Hermangild Foundation International. Esther has also organized step-down training to build the capacity of community members, volunteers, as well as organizational staff on mental health and psychosocial support, risk assessment, and suicide prevention. Also facilitates various support group meetings and capacity building meetings. Welcome to the show, Esther. It's such a pleasure being with you today.
Thank you very much. It's such a privilege to be a part of this panelist today, and I'm so excited. Thank you.
Thank you. So our second panelist is Elisha Chijioke Nwankwo. He is a GYMHA ambassador and volunteers engagement coordinator. Welcome to the show, Elisha.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I feel delighted to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So before we start our show, I know it's our tradition here to always ask people how they are feeling today. So I'd like to know how each of you is feeling today. Any of you can go, Esther or Chijioke.
I'm feeling very good this morning, and I'm so excited. Thank you very much for asking.
Thank you. Chijioke, how are you
Thank you
feeling
very
today?
much. Thank you very much. I want to appreciate GYMHA and God for making it possible for us to be here today. I feel so happy and I am doing fine. Thank you very much.
Great, great. As for me, I'm doing well. I'm doing fantastic. I'm so grateful for the gift of life. Yeah. So, our dear viewers, in our show today, we are going to discuss a very exciting and very deep topic Yeah, a topic that many people don't like speaking about because of fear and also stigma. You know, so our topic today is on childhood trauma, and we want to share and discuss about how childhood trauma affects people in their adult life. So this is a topic that is also very close to my heart because every time I think of childhood, I think it's as a period of innocence, you know, and children when they are born, what they expect is love, they expect harmony, they expect that they find support, you know, from their caregivers. But unfortunately, this is not what happens to all the children. Some children experience chaos, so they grow up in a chaotic environment. This is what we are calling childhood traumas, you know, the adverse childhood experiences that they go through in their childhood. And we say that these experiences can affect them in their adult life. So with our amazing panelists today, I can't wait to see what they have in store for us. And so my first question would be to our panelists, what is childhood trauma? How can you define childhood trauma? Esther, you're welcome.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so when we talk about childhood trauma, it has to do with the experiences a child have, more like a scary, dangerous, violent, or even life-threatening events that actually impact the child negatively, and it can otherwise be called adverse childhood trauma. So these traumatic experiences have a way of weakening a child's stability and sense of self, and it can also undermine the sense of self-worth in the child, which can cause inferiority complex in the child or low self-esteem, and this can have a negative effect on the adult life of the child. So that's what childhood trauma is. I don't know if I can go ahead to list most of these traumatic events or
Yeah, sure, you can go ahead. You can go ahead.
okay. Okay, thank you very much. So traumatic event here means more like a stress or these things that actually exposes a child to experience this trauma. And we have different traumatic events that a child will likely experience, which can result in childhood trauma in later life. And we have kind of abuse, abuse of all kinds, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional or psychological abuse. So most of the caregivers of these children, most times they say things that actually reduce this child's self-worth, making the child feel bad or comparing the child to the next person. And it has a way of making this child feel like they are not worth it. And this can be traumatic because later in adult life, they don't find the need to actually express who they really are because of those verbal abuse they experience as a child or sexual abuse. It can actually have a negative impact on this child as they grow up. Then we have when a child witnesses domestic violence, it has a way of traumatizing the child, and if it is not resolved and taken care of at that stage, it results in childhood trauma in adulthood. Then bullying. So most children are being bullied either by people older than them or their peers in school environments or in even their surrounding, and this is very traumatic to the child growth. Physical and emotional neglect. So most of our parents just feel their responsibility is just to take care of us, like let them just feed us and send us to school. But there's no emotional support either from the both parents or either of the parents or even people close to the child. So this neglect can be very traumatic. And then a family member who is depressed or diagnosed with mental illness. can actually have a negative effect on a child's growth and can result in childhood trauma. Witnessing a mother being abused, most of our kids, they grow up in an abusive home where the father constantly abused the mother or vice versa. So this can be very traumatic and detrimental to their growth. And then being maltreated or ill-treated as a child. So most of them may not have the ability to grow up with their family. Maybe they lost their parents or they're abandoned or neglected, and then they have to stay with someone else who did not give birth to them. So most of these people might not really take care of these children's needs, thereby maltreating them, treating them, starving them. This can be very traumatic and can result in childhood trauma in adulthood if it is not resolved. So those are some of the traumatic events that actually exposes a child to childhood trauma in adulthood.
Thank you very much, Esther. That's really incredible information there. Chijioke, what do you have to add to that?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Esther, for the wonderful work. To start with, I would like to first tell us who a child is. A child is. When we're talking about childhood trauma, we first of all understand who a child is. A child is that person that is between the age of 0 to 18, between the age of 0 to maybe say 18 or 17. Let's say 17 because at 18, some aspect of life has been considered to be an adult. Now, when we are looking at childhood trauma, is one of these um, bitter life experience that a child had, that a child always has, that has a very lasting mental health effect on that particular child. Some of these experiences are very difficult and painful to the extent that this child find it difficult to even cope in life with this kind of experiences. Now, to further explain this, the National Institute of Mental Health defines childhood trauma as that experience that a child has that has a lasting mental health effect on that particular child. That is to say, some of these traumatic events like accidents, domestic violence, these are some of the things that triggers a child that even when he gets to adulthood, he will find it very, very difficult to forget that. Now, to understand this more, I want to take us through the three E's of trauma. Through the three E's of trauma. The three E's of trauma, we have the event, we have the experience, and we have the event, we have the experience, and we have the impact. Now, when we talk about the event, these are actually the real harm that happens to a child during his or her childhood that makes him very, very difficult for him to cope. Some of these things like the loss of loved ones, like domestic violence. Some of these are emotionally triggered, and this thing can make a child to have a lasting mental health effect. Now, the second one is experience. Experience has to do with how that child perceive or explain or give meaning to that event that happened to him. Now, as we all know that children are different in understanding and perception, and these children perceive or understand events in their life in different way. Now, the way one child understand an issue may not be the way another child will give a meaning to that same event. So these traumatic events are understood by different child in many ways, and for them to go out of it is always difficult for them. Always difficult for them. Now, the third E is the effect. The effect has to do with the impact it has created on that child. The impact it has created on that. Remember, this child has moved from childhood to adulthood. Now, the impact on his or her adulthood is very, very severe. And this has to do with sometimes you see somebody behaving abnormally, somebody feeling guilt, somebody feeling ashamed, somebody having issue with trust. All these are the effects of this traumatic event in a child. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that detailed explanation. I agree with you. both of you. Yes, and just to echo on what both of you have said, that childhood trauma actually has a great impact on a person's psychological well-being. Let me say that it affects a child all the way to adulthood, like all of you have said. And I just want us to imagine, like, if us as grown-ups, when we experience a traumatic event, it's very hard on us. It's very tough to even just interpret it. So you can imagine what it feels like to a child whose mind is still developing. The mind of a child is very fragile, it's still developing. So when they experience traumatic events, the way they interpret them, it's not the way an adult can interpret the events. And when they are not helped process this trauma, it actually it actually remains in the subconscious mind, and it affects them later in life. So it's very important that we speak about this topic, because it is very prevalent in our society, and people don't want to speak about it. And trauma transmits in silence, from one generation to another, because this was done maybe to your parent. The parent is doing it to the child, and the child will do it in future. So let us speak about it. Let us not be afraid to speak about childhood trauma and its effects. Now, with that said, I'll ask my next question is, what are the symptoms of childhood trauma in adulthood? Like, how can you know that someone has gone through childhood trauma? Alicia?
Okay. Do I go first?
Yes, you can go.
Okay. Okay, so some of the symptoms of childhood trauma in adulthood, you might see an adult experiencing feelings of shame and guilt. Like whatever they do in their adult life, they feel is not enough. They feel they have more to do. So most times it's as a result of unresolved trauma that they experienced as a child, which was not well addressed, and then feeling depressed. So most depression episodes that people feel, it doesn't just originate. Like let's say you felt an interview. It's before it goes to depression. There are other factors which might likely be childhood unresolved trauma that triggers the depression episodes in you. So that's a symptom, another symptom of childhood trauma in adulthood. And then anxiety or being in a state of constant alert. So probably as a child, you experience armed robbery attack, and maybe there was violence initiated at the point of the attack. So in your adult life, maybe you were not able to really resolve that issue. So in your adult life, you are in constant alert. Like if you see anything similar to that which represents the traumatic event, then you are so scared, you are constantly afraid, fearful, and might likely develop anxiety. And then nightmares or flashbacks or trouble sleeping is another symptom of childhood trauma in adulthood. So most adults have flashback memories, events that might have happened years back, and it keep reoccurring. You keep remembering them, and each time you think about it, it leaves you sad. It makes you feel bad. It makes you feel like there's something you could have done that you did not do, and you keep blaming yourself for that. So it's a symptom that there's an unresolved childhood trauma, and then attachment issues. So most of the children that grows up in an environment where they were neglected by their maybe caregivers or loved ones. So when they grow up, it increases attachments with a particular person they are comfortable with, or it makes them detached from that very person. So let's also set example of a child that experienced sexual abuse by caregiver, because most of this trauma might come from within, internalized. So a child that experienced maybe sexual abuse or physical abuse from the caregiver might likely not want to trust anybody. So they have problem being close to anybody or being themselves around anybody. So it causes attachment issues, or in most cases might make this individual clingy. Most of them seek acceptance and recognition from another person because they never received it from where they come from. So everything they do seem to try to impress a particular person. So they might go out of their way to do these things, which might actually make them clingy to this particular human being, and they might likely get hurt because as they are trying to please this person, they have expectations. And when those expectations are not met, it has a way of hurting them and re-traumatizing them. So that's another symptom of childhood trauma. And then substance abuse. So maybe let's say a child that grew up in an environment where maybe the adults in his or her life were abusing substance or addicted to substance, and they don't see any other way of coping with stress or any other traumatic event. They might likely tend to abuse substance later in life or get addicted to substance. And then pounding heart, like whether there is anything that happen or triggers them or not, their heart seems to pound and beat faster. So it as a result of childhood trauma, especially when it is persistent and constant, and then poor academic performance or work performances. So most children, no matter what they do, they are not appreciated for it. So even while in school, all they think about is how they can actually pass their exams or something, and at the end of the day they still don't perform well, and they now go back and they are still abused by the people they are trying to please. It can also eat up into their work performance. So it's a sign of unresolved childhood trauma, especially when it interferes with your normal life. And then engaging in self-harming behavior or having suicidal thoughts, intent, or ideation. So at some point you might just feel like, what's the point of living? Like life is not worth it. No matter what you do, nobody see a good in it. And no matter how you try to impress people, they are still not getting enough of you. So the next thought is, okay, so what am I living for? You want to take your life, or you can actually inflict harm on yourself, maybe with the thought that whatever happened or bad circumstances can happen, it might be part of your fault, blaming yourself for it, and which might actually trigger self-harm behavior or suicide. And then inferiority complex. This is very common. This is very common because children, when they are born, they seem to everything they learn is from the adults in their life and the environment. So at some point when they are made to feel that they are not important or they can't amount to anything, it creates this sense of inferiority complex in them. So you might likely see a situation whereby a child knows a lot about a topic discussed, maybe in a classroom, but he or she is so afraid to speak out or to say what they know about that topic, with the thought that what if I make a mistake? They might likely laugh at me or call me the name till I leave school. A lot of other factors surrounding that might make a child not to be able to interact properly among peers in a classroom or work environment or anywhere. So it kind of reduce their self-esteem, reduce their self-worth, and make them feel so inferior about themselves, thinking other people are better than them. So when you see this in an adult, then it's likely can be traced to their childhood experiences. And then it can also lower immune system. Let's talk about the physical aspect of it or the body aspect of it. It can lower your immune system, like childhood trauma. It has a way of slowing down the activity of the nervous system or regulating, affecting your emotional regulation. So it's symptoms of childhood trauma. And then engaging in risky behavior, yes. So most individuals, they just feel that, what am I living for? They don't care about it anymore. So they might likely involve in unprotected sexual intercourse, even when they have full knowledge of sexually transmitted infections. So they don't really care. So they can actually indulge in risky behaviors like that, or is it criminology? They can actually wants to rob people because at that point their life doesn't even make meaning to them anymore. And if you look at what's the recent happening in Nigeria, like most of the things that these guys do, if you want to track it back to where it's originating from, it can be an unresolved childhood trauma because they don't have any other thoughts about themselves, their life, their future. They have given up on it. So all they do is to inflict pains on other people. So unresolved childhood trauma can actually make a person project those inferiority complex to the next person. They can actually project whatever they are going through to the next person. They want to inflict the same pain on another person. The person will actually feel the way they feel, and they don't care. So they can hurt people, they can do a lot of things, and it's as a result of unresolved childhood trauma. I think this trauma are resolved and they heal from it. It has a way of making them a better person in the society. So these are few symptoms of childhood trauma that I can actually list.
Thank you very much, Elsa. I'm just listening to you, and I'm just thinking that it's so sad for children to actually go through this. Yeah, and many times we see people struggling with some of these symptoms that you've mentioned. And maybe we are very quick to judge people, but what we don't know is that maybe these people went through childhood trauma. So it's very,
Yeah.
very, very important to handle everyone with grace. Yeah. Chidioke,
Yeah.
what do you have to add on that?
Yes, thank you, Esther, for the wonderful analogy. I want to come in this way. Um, Virtually, especially in this modern world where we see or hear the cases of child abuse everywhere, there are a lot of symptoms. There are a lot of symptoms that we see every day. One of those symptoms is that strong, strong feeling of reaction. Sometimes you see somebody who is who will behave the way you won't even explain. Sometimes you ask some persons, why are you doing what you are doing? They may not be able to tell you. That is strong, unexplained reaction. Sometimes somebody will just act the way he is acting simply because being true. So that is why some I do recommend that psychologists should be placed in virtually all workplaces because this modern world needs psychology as mental health specialists very, very well. Another symptom is shift in emotional shift. Sometimes you will be working with somebody in a workplace. Before you know, that person's mood, that person's emotion will automatically change. Is as a result of childhood trauma, childhood experience that person sometimes, just as Esther mentioned, sometimes in class you will discover that you will be two or three learning in class. Sometimes you just see a child just face the table and the child will feel like I don't want to learn again. As a mental health specialist, you need to ask that person why. But in today's educational system, they don't even want to know, especially in Nigeria here, whether you are failing or you are passing. So there is need and there is more to do when it comes to childhood trauma because it is actually one of the things that we have failed to tackle, and that is why we are having a lot of problem in the world. Another symptom that we can take from there is unable to cope with a normal stress. Unable to cope with normal stress. In workplace especially where you have different kind of persons and different level of stress, you will see somebody who will tell you, I don't want to kill myself. Even when that person is passing at the same level of stress that normally every normal human being can pass through. But you never blame that person because you don't know what that person has passed through when he or she was a child. So there is actually a lot of symptoms, and that one is lack of trust. Lack of trust. The symptom is that they don't want to trust anybody. They don't want to trust anybody because of what happened in the past. I have a friend who in Lagos here who has done business. He did the business of ₦1 million with another friend who disappointed him. He just paid money into the account. It's not an internet business, it's a fiscal business, fiscal giving of cash. Till today, this guy disappeared to the thin air. Nobody sees him again. He did the second one with 800,000. and till today have not seen the person. Today, that kind of person, he can never trust his parents, let alone he can never in fact he told me emphatically that he can never trust anybody again. So it's due to what this childhood experience that people are having that is causing a lot of issue in the world today. So there is really a lot of symptoms that we can get from, ranging from biological, physical, mental health symptoms. All these are things combined together that we see every day in today's world. And sometimes you see somebody that is having relationship issue. That is another symptom of childhood trauma. Relationship issue, inability to cope with a particular relationship. Yes, sometimes you discover that somebody is running from a relationship to another simply because of what happened to him or her in the past, because he or she assumed that what happened in the past will still repeat in the current one. So it's actually a big problem and a big issue in today's world, and there are a lot of them. There are a lot of them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I like looking at childhood trauma like like a schema. It's the trauma that happens, then there is a story behind it, and then there is the belief. You see, like for example, take an example of a child who's always blamed every time. They will develop a story and a belief about themselves, and they start wondering like, why is it always me? What is wrong? I'm not good enough. You see, now when they start having such beliefs about themselves, is what I can pick from both of you. You've talked about, it affects the confidence, it affects the self-esteem of a person, and they will always be feeling that they're not good enough, and it also affects just how people relate with everyone generally. Their relationships. It affects how they relate to their parents at work, everywhere, developing an insecure attachment. And it's actually very sad, and it's important that we are talking about this, just trying to break the stigma and creating awareness, because I know maybe there are people who are watching us right now and they can pick from their behaviors. Maybe they've not been knowing that what they are exhibiting is actually a sign of childhood trauma. So it's important that we go to the root cause. For us to heal, we need to go to the root cause and know what is actually eating us up. Yeah. So yeah. With that said, so can we explain what is complex trauma, and especially in adulthood? How can you explain complex trauma in adulthood? Esther, please.
Okay, complex on its own means multiple, like it's much, it's not one, it's plenty or it's many. So complex childhood trauma describes a child's exposure to multiple traumatic events and the long-term effects of this exposure on the child's adult life. So it is a series of traumatic events that take place repeatedly over a long period of time, and it can distort one's sense of self, making it difficult to control the person's emotion and causes relationship challenges. So let's say a child that grew up in a household where maybe a relative, an uncle, sexually abused her, a girl child, yeah. So, and this is not once, this is not twice, it's repeated itself. It happens multiple times. So it has a way of causing a more severe mental illness in later life. Such traumatic event cannot easily be gotten over from, except the due process is taken. So recently too, we have heard of so many news where a daughter is aborting pregnancy for the father. Like the father is constantly abusing the daughter and telling her not to tell anyone. So it's as a way of eating up the child and making the child experience a more severe mental disorder like post-traumatic stress disorder. this results later in adulthood, where you now see that most of the things you are reacting to is as a result of what you were exposed to as a child, which did not happen once or twice, but multiple times. So that's what complex childhood trauma is. And example of this complex childhood trauma includes sexual abuse or incest. Incest, like the relative of the child, the uncle, the father, or whoever is relating to the child, abusing the child sexually, and then maybe a stranger to abusing the child. That's sexual and abuse and incest, and then ongoing physical or emotional abuse. So I've met a girl that said the father constantly abused her and the mother. So this hits up, like this hit her up, and in adulthood she developed severe depression. So it's something that if it is not resolved at that, if it is not addressed, if it is not resolved, it has a way of affecting this child in adulthood. And then chronic neglect or abandonment, a child that experiences neglect from parents or loved ones, or is abandoned or is made to feel like he or she is not important, can't belong to a particular place. This is a complex childhood trauma because it's repeatedly. And then torture or being held captive. So most let's talk about kidnapping now. So a child has been exposed to kidnapping maybe as a child. It's like being detained there. It's already something that's traumatic because the experience there is not nice. So it has a way of resurfacing in adulthood. And then human trafficking. Trafficking of children out is a complex childhood trauma. And then living in a war zone or area of civil unrest, or because we can actually talk about, for example, in Nigeria, the Northerners are living in constant fear because a lot of things keeps happening. They keep the bandits, the Boko Haram people, they keep invading these areas, and you can't go to bed and just sleep like that because you don't know what will be the next action. So this is complex, and it can actually affect the child's adult life. So those are some of the symptoms of complex childhood trauma, or sorry, example of childhood complex childhood trauma. And then the symptoms is also similar to that of um, childhood trauma, normal childhood trauma, where they have flashback memories, they lost memories, they can actually affect their memory, and then difficulty regulating emotions. So it can actually affect how they interpret emotions and how they regulate emotions. They can feel angry on something that is not really something that should trigger the anger, and they can feel excited about something. Maybe you can imagine telling somebody that I just lost my dad, and the person say congratulations. So that's more like difficulty regulating emotion at that point. They can't really interpret what is going on. So this as a result of this trauma on the child. And then hyper arousal or being on alert, so that's similar to normal childhood trauma, where you are always panicking, like the Northerners, they're always panicking. You don't even feel safe walking on the road. You don't know the next action. So this is the symptoms of complex childhood trauma.
Okay. Thank you very much, Esther.
Okay, thank you very much, Esther, for your presentation. I want to come in this way. You know, a lot of things are actually happening in this world, and what I shall be giving us as some of the childhood trauma complex that is very complex in the today's world. I will be using the common one, the visible one, and the one we often see every day. Now, one of the childhood complex experience is child neglect. Child neglect. As a matter of fact, when you wake up in the morning, probably going to work, you will see a lot of children walking on the street. You'll be like, wow, what is happening? There are a lot issues in child neglect, and this has really caused a lot when they get, in fact, as a child, when you are being abandoned or left in your childhood age, sometimes you will see life in the street as a normal life. And that is why you see somebody in the street, you see a lot of people in the street, sometimes if you get closer to those person and ask them why you decide to choose a street life, you will discover that these persons are not doing it because they want to do it, but because of their childhood experiences, because they don't have choice. They see that as the only thing they could do to survive in life. And that one is child abuse. Child abuse. There are a lot of cases on rape where where the girl child is being raped every day, and this has a lot of traumatic experiences in them. When they grow up with this sense that they have been raped, and some of them who are too religious, we always find it very difficult to forget that, and they will use it till they grow, and when they grow up with it, it will become a problem, it will become a challenge to them. It will only take a therapist to save them in that kind of situation. Another complex childhood traumatic experience that is very much visible is violence. Today, today, sometimes when I take my time to study, some marriages, I discover that a lot of things are actually going on. This exposes children to traumatic experiences, especially where you see where a child wake up every morning and see the mom and the dad quarreling, fighting in the house. It passes a lot of message to them, and it poses the question to them in their heart: is this how difficult marriage would be? See, this kind of person that experience this kind of situation, we always find it very, very difficult to get to stay in marriage, because they have only understood that marriage is full of violence and nothing else. So these are some of the visible complex childhood experience that is common in today's world. And one thing I always tell people is that to fall into traumatic experience is not your fault, but getting out of it, healing is your responsibility. Until you begin to understand that you are the only one that have to take charge in order to rescue yourself from these experiences, you will not get out of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that great insight. Yeah, so what I can add on that is when we speak about complex trauma, like Esther said, it's when trauma is repeated and it's so realize that when we experience trauma, it's normal for our brains to release the stress hormones, you know, and then so these stress hormones makes us respond in a fight or a flight response, you know. But now this trauma is repeated frequently and often, especially in children, it affects how their brain develops, you know. And so that trauma now becomes complex, and that's what we're talking about now, these signs of childhood trauma that you see in people. And you see, like Esther had mentioned before, that it also affects the immune system of a person. You realize that a person starts having like a heart attack, you know, diabetes, and just somatic problems. They start experiencing pain in their bodies, headaches. Yeah, so childhood trauma is actually it's a very, very heavy topic to speak about, and it's important that we are here trying to break the cycle. So, dear viewers, if you've just joined us, we are here today with our great panelists speaking about childhood trauma and its impact in adult life. So, today, we asked our panelists, what are the long-term mental illnesses caused by childhood trauma? What are some of the mental illnesses, the long mental illnesses that are caused by childhood trauma? Esther.
Sorry. I didn't get the question. What are what?
Okay, I asked, what are the long-term mental illnesses that are caused by childhood trauma?
Okay. So the long-term illness caused by childhood trauma most likely is post-traumatic stress disorder. So a lot of children are exposed to traumatic events at some point, and while some of them are able to adjust traumatic events, they exercise reactions to these stresses and trauma momentarily, while others might likely re-experience this trauma. And when this happens, it's the possibility of it leading to post-traumatic stress disorder is very high. And post-traumatic stress disorder here means like a mental health disorder that a person experiences as a result of being exposed to traumatic events which are not resolved. So the long-term illness here is post-traumatic stress disorder, and then sorry, the some of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder here, which also are similar to normal um, traumatic experiences is nightmares or flashbacks, sadness or negative mood. So when a trauma is not resolved, when a trauma is not addressed, it actually can develop into the post-traumatic stress disorder, which can cause other mental illnesses like depression, anxiety, substance use disorder in adult life, suicidal behavior and self-harm behavior, then avoidance of people, like you try to avoid people because you don't want to re-experience those things, avoiding situations and avoiding any activity or event that might likely remind you of what happened, and then withdrawal, like a child that or a person that have post-traumatic stress disorder tends to withdraw. The person might withdraw from peers, withdraw from social gathering, withdraw from even family, and then self-destructive or risky behaviors. So these are some of the symptoms that a child had an unresolved trauma, which actually lead to post-traumatic stress disorder, which can trigger other mental illnesses. So that's the long-term effect of childhood trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Thank you very much, Esther. Chijoke, what do you have to add to that?
Yes, one thing I have come to realize is that most of these childhood traumatic experiences, it actually takes sometimes it actually take a lifetime to think about what happened to you in the past. Sometimes it takes a lifetime. Takes a lifetime. Now, some of the long-lasting, um, some of the long-lasting effect is that one, it will lead to aggressive behavior. Aggressive behavior. Some persons in life, in fact, it will only take God for them to go back to their normal person whenever they experience anything difficult in the past. Some persons who has been abused, who has been neglected, or who has gone through a lot of childhood experiences find it very difficult to recuperate themselves into the social system. That is why it takes only God and therapists to help them out. So another one is anxiety. Anxiety, and most especially one of the things that they always resort to is suicide. Suicide is one other long-lasting effect, because sometimes people decide, because of what I've seen in the past, I don't need to live again. I have to just die. That is why we are seeing much more of suicide cases in today's world. Is as a result of childhood trauma, as a result of what people passed through in the past. And oh, some will say, I don't want to live again. I don't want to experience this again. And another one is the issue of trust. The issue of trust is very, very important here, because when somebody go through a traumatic event in life, it will be very difficult for that person to trust again. As a matter of fact, some say, in fact, some have chosen to live a single life instead of being with somebody because of what has happened to them in the past. So it actually has a lot of lasting or long lasting effect on adulthood. And all these are things that are causing social problem in the society today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's actually true. Childhood trauma has lasting impacts on the mental health of a person. And so it's important to resolve the trauma. Don't just sit, and it's not wrong, to look back, but don't stay there. Just reflect on what maybe you went through, then try to resolve it, acknowledge it, process the emotions, and then let them go. Yeah, because holding on to the traumas that we've experienced, we've